Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 16, 2017 special meeting of the Glendale City Council being called to order at 10:05. May I please have your roll call, please?
Council members Agajanian. Present. Devine.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Sinanian. Here. Mayor Garpetian.
Here. May I please have your report?
Agenda for the May 16, 2017 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Friday, May 12, 2017 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. The items before you are the minutes of the special City Council meeting of May 2nd, 2017.
Okay, is there a
Motion
motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Do we need a roll call or no? No. Yes?
No.
No roll call for the minutes? Okay.
Next
Minutes
item
stands
is
approved as submitted. What's
you.
next, please?
Next item is Director of Finance regarding budget study session number 3, recap fiscal year 2017-18 capital improvement program CIP and new fees.
Ms. Rocha?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I know Mr. Agajanian has questions about last week's presentation.
I have a question about on the one which says fire department. Now I don't know why I can't find it. I had the slide, I guess 53 and whatever. Let me see, where is the fire department? It says, however, it says overtime.
Yes.
And it's approximately, for the past year, has been,
I'm sorry, Mr. Aljamin. Could you tell us where you are so we can follow as well?
I'm trying to find it, May 9th, where it says overtime for the fire department.
Slide 53.
The slide one?
I believe it's slide 53.
Yes,
That's
53.
the one you're
That's
referring
right.
to.
That's 53. I was going to say 55, but yeah, it's right, 53. It says overtime, total overtime cost. And for the 3/4, which we know for a fact is like $7,483,815, and you projected that it will end up with $9,978,000. For one, I didn't see overtime for any other department. I don't know why just fire department has overtime.
Sure.
And the other issue which bothers me is if we are paying $10 million overtime and the budget itself was last year, or meaning 2016, 2017 was $48 million. General fund budget was budgeted for $48 million. Mm-hmm. This is like 21% of the budget. I don't know if this is included in that $48 million or this is extra. And lastly, I want to understand $10 million, or I'm sure fire department, police department. I mean, it's not just, I'm not targeting only the fire department.
Sure.
It's generally I have problem with overtime, and we are talking about the employees, about getting higher salaries, and we have problem with, I think, I don't know the detail of it, but 10 million is as if only 100 people in fire department, let's say, if they get 100,000 or more, that will satisfy 1,000 other employees. We have this fixed amount of money. A few people, they take a lot, so there is nothing left for the others. So, in my opinion, we have to be very vigilant with overtime, any department, because 100 people will get $10 million, where we can pay 1,000 people $10,000 will come to the same amount. I mean, more than half of the employees, they can $10,000 extra money to satisfy their expenses, rather than these few people, they take it all.
I would tell you that those 10,000 people are neither trained nor capable of putting out fires and or delivering advanced life support. And so to say that we can give every integrated waste truck driver the same amount that you would provide to a firefighter or paramedic, that I don't think that analogy necessarily holds, because they do different jobs. With respect to the amount of overtime, the reason why it's a key performance indicator here I think you put your finger on it very adroitly. Overtime is a significant portion of the fire department's budget. In fact, overtime is a significant portion of the police department's budget, as well as any of our 24-hour operations, particularly in an operation where you have a minimum level of staffing that's required. So if you decided that you were sick today and did not come to work, then we would have 4 council members. In an environment that is a mandatory level of service, an emergency service at that, then when you don't come into work today, we have to hire somebody back at time and a half to come do that job. And in the fire service, because there's 3 different shifts, not only do we have to have that person replaced, we have to have it replaced on all 3 shifts, depending on how long that they're going to be out for. Now, to the extent that the fire department schedule, the Kelly schedule, as they call it, that's been in place for many, 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 many years, that most fire departments, most all fire departments I know of, operate on, where you're on, then you're off, then you're on, then you're off, then you're on, then you're off for 4 days. That creates, in and of itself, a significant draw on overtime. And so the reason why we track it here, but don't necessarily track it, we track it for all departments, but we don't necessarily report it as a key performance indicator for, say, human resources or finance, is because it doesn't have the same, as you point out, the same impact on the overall budget as it does for the fire department, because it is a large chunk of the fire department budget. All of these costs are embedded in that department budget.
$48 million, this $10 million is
part of their overall budget, yes. So they may run over on overtime. And in fact, I know they will run over on overtime, but they will have salary savings from existing vacancies. Like right now, you saw that we are putting people through the fire academy. So we still have to fill those positions for the people that are in the fire academy but are not yet firefighter paramedics, that are not yet in the department. So we have to hire back for those people. Now, PERS being what it is, and you're talking about that PERS cost, it's so overwhelming. In many cases, hiring back somebody on overtime, because overtime is not PERSable, it makes more sense for me to hire back or have Chief Fish or even Chief Castro hire back officers, firefighters on overtime and not incur that new PERS obligation for a brand new body if they were to show up on there. So you mix that pressure of the overall PERS cost with the dynamics of fielding a fire department, let alone a police department or some of the other departments, and ultimately you see that overtime is a big draw. Now, then you say, well, if that's the case, then how do we know that we're not paying too much for overtime? That's a good question. I would tell you that as Chief Fish will go and interact with other chiefs in the LA County area, they will compare notes. How much do you spend? How much do you spend? How much do you spend as an average for the number of employees that you have? And I will tell you, and I'm sure Chief Fish will tell you, we're right about average. If you're going to have a fire service, you're going to pay significant amounts of overtime. But I will tell you that to the extent that his department, if you saw in the department strategic goals that we presented last week, one of the ones that was a holdover from the current fiscal year was putting together a tracking mechanism for overtime so that he and his command staff are able to pinpoint and kind of rally towards areas where we might have a large number of injuries on duty, where we might have people that are all going off on training for some reason, and try to make sure that if we see that those large blips in overtime are coming, well, maybe we will hold back on some of the training as the law would allow, or other means as a manager that he can employ to ensure that we're not overshooting that overtime cost. So, all of his personnel costs are all in that general fund budget.
Is there any way we can have a report about overtime in the city of Glendale, that which departments, what we are paying, and how this works? Like, as you said, somebody else, one person replacing another person in fire department, or this is not directed only to fire department. I'm talking about generally police department, public works. If they are replacing the other person, I mean, they get 50% more for coming in
Time and a half,
replacing.
right.
So is there, I can ask for any report about the overtime that...
Why don't we do this, and I will defer certainly to the mayor and council, because this question comes up very often, I think, as people are kind of onboarding onto the city council, just because it's a different way of operation. I can have Chief Fish meet with you one-on-one, and then following that discussion, that briefing, and if you want, what we can do is also have HR Director Matt Doyle and Yasmin Beers. They'll go through all the departments with you And then from that point, if you want to bring it to council, certainly the mayor can ask that we agendize a report to cover all overtime. But I think to the extent that some of them, actually all of them at one point or another, were in the same position you're in now, saying, okay, well, why do we do it that way? I think we can make the most use of your time and theirs by let's get you all this information in a briefing, and then if you want to bring it up here at the council, by all means you can. I mean, Mr. Mayor, I would defer to you, but
Yeah, I mean, by all means, we'll agendize it
Okay,
to bring
thank
the
you.
report back. We talked about this last year as well and the year before, and we made some changes on the hiring portion of the new recruits to send them to school first to become a paramedic. Then we hire them. I think it was 50% of the employees that we're going to hire. They're going to paramedic school first to become a paramedic. I mean, to school first to become a paramedic. Then we will hire them. So you don't have to fill that position when you hire a firefighter with $100,000 a year. Then he or she will go to become a paramedic. You fill that position and you pay time and a half. Am I correct?
yes, sir.
So that's one of the issues that we were wrestling with, and I think it's being addressed by Chief Fish that half of our recruits are going to be. We changed the system. They will explain it to you when they have a one.
And you see, one of the goals for the coming year is also to change it even further, such that we would have less, if any, on-duty staff be the instructors for those academies, thus cutting back that cost that we do have to backfill, right? So we'll have somebody from outside of the current ranks being basically the drill sergeant for the academy, and that would hopefully reduce our costs further. So lots of effort in maintaining and controlling overtime, particularly in the emergency services departments, because they have minimum levels of staffing 24 hours a day.
Right. I think it will take a little time for this program to be more effective because our overtime from last year even increased. Last year, I believe it was $7.5 or $8 million. This year is about almost $10 million. So it is in place. The program is in place. It's working, but it will take a little time to be more effective on our numbers here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. This being study session number 3, customarily this is where we do the CIP review and the update, introduction of the fee schedule. So again, you have a booklet that was in your packets of the fee schedule. Armin Harkalian, our revenue manager, is here, and he puts together this entire fee booklet, and you will have the opportunity today and any time between now and June the 6th to ask questions about any of the information that we will provide you an overview, a briefing today in this study session. And by the same token, all the departments are here by way of capital improvement projects. And any questions that you have tonight, and I apologize in advance. A little bit of that kind of frog in your throat that's going around here. But any questions that you may have about projects, all the departments are here today, but certainly if you want to ask questions individually offline, you can do that with all of the departments. So, as I say, we'll go through all of the CIP budgets and then bring in Armin to go through the fee schedule. And we will have, for the benefit of our newest member of the team, the opportunity to talk about the background of how we put together the fee schedule. With that, here's an overview of the projects that I'm going to talk about. In the Department of Community, and understanding that there are CIP budgets, capital improvement program budgets in the general fund and in non-general fund operations. And so you'll see some of the detail in just a bit. But again, thumbnail sketch, the big projects that you'll see for the various departments are outlined on this slide. The Beeline bus maintenance facility, we have the property. We are negotiating now for a design-build contract, and kudos to Councilman Najarian for working with Metro to free up the last couple $1 million that we had that will be used to complete this project. As Council knows, once we have this project, when we go, once we have the facility built, when we go out to request for proposal for bus operators, we will have that bus operator utilize our then existing maintenance facility. Thus, it will invite a greater degree of competition for bus providers in the city. The Lemley project is the last redevelopment project for the city of Glendale. That is the $1.1 million in the general fund, in Fund 101, that is is there to account for the inclusion of underground parking in the Lemley Lofts project, which is darn near finished, at least the lofts part. I think they're having their groundbreaking that first week of June, or the grand opening rather, the first week of June for the lofts themselves, and then the Panda Inn and the Lemley Theaters, will be shortly thereafter. The flower. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, can you elaborate on that 1.1 million? Is this part of the original development agreement that we had with them?
This is an addendum to the original development agreement, but it all goes back to 2011. Even this 1.1 goes back to 2011. The original project, go ahead.
So what is the total city's portion that we contributed to this project, besides giving the land?
Will be the 1.1 million.
There was no 1.5 million in the beginning for the soft cost?
I have, Phil, do you know?
It was split. Actually, it was a redevelopment project. When redevelopment was dissolved, there were certain costs that were allowed, the 1.5 million, so those came out of old redevelopment dollars, and then the city agreed to fund the 1.1, and all of it is for some public improvements and some things that we're going to be sharing, but it all goes back to a redevelopment agreement and that that philosophy of subsidizing for something that we want.
So
But this is an existing agreement that the city council approved in, I want to say, 2013.
Why hasn't it been paid so far? Because the project was not done?
Correct. It's on a
completed?
reimbursement basis, so once they incur the costs, we then pay it back. Actually, I believe that the way that this is structured is as a use covenant. So there's a payment that is made in order for them to have that use for a certain period of time.
So this 1.1 million is for the parking structure that they built already?
It was the parking.
Subterranean parking, which is 46 parking spaces?
That's when it all came about, when we put the parking structure into the deal back in 2011. And then there was a number, it was $2.6 million that was going to be the redevelopment agency's contribution. With the dissolution of redevelopment, only 1.5 of that was approved out of redevelopment dollars. The city at the time said, this is important for us, we want to finish it off. We will commit $1.1 million of, and this was agency money that came to the city. And so at the time, the city council said, we'll commit that and finish off our obligation of $2.6 million.
Okay, I just want to be very clear because we've been talking about a few projects and the shortage of parkings, 2 parkings here and 10 parkings there. And I just want to mention that we invested about $2.6 or $7 million into this project, plus the land, plus this project is providing, 46 parking spaces total, not even
It's
close to be 1/4 of what it would require, maybe less than 1/4 of what it would require in by code today or by code at that time. So I just want to remind everyone that when we look at different projects, we have to look at what historically has been done and how much did we contribute on top of giving them the parking reduction that this project would have had. I mean, you have 46 or 43 units. I don't know what the unit mix is. They have to have at least 50, 60. Or by code, if you're outside that DSP, you need 100 parking spaces only for that residential use, plus the theater that is 600 seat, plus the restaurant, which is, 8 to 10,000 square feet. Restaurant needs 50 parking spaces. So I just want to remind everyone to be really mindful of what we've done and for upcoming projects or former projects previous projects that we approved, bear in mind that what the city had done overall.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So I was around when this whole deal went through, and it was a deal that had been on the books for quite a long time. There were some funding gaps and all that, but let me state that what happened in this project or any other project prior in no way, in my mind, sets a precedent on what we need to do or what we have to do. To look back and say we gave this project 10 years ago this sort of parking exception in no way plays in my mind. I don't think it's even appropriate to bring it to the present day and say, well, look what we did back then at a different time in a different place with a different funding source, so let's do the same thing today. Because if that's the case, then this city is going to be in a death spiral, looking back to 1 or 2 particular projects where there were special circumstances which called for some parking variances.
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Najarian. In fact, we do look at every project, and every project needs to prove the need. The redevelopment agency at the time said, this is the project that we want. And you look at the value, what it costs, and if there's a gap, the redevelopment agency can decide, yes, we want to fill that because we want this catalyst project. And this was to be an anchor for the Art and Entertainment District. So again, at the time, the redevelopment agency said we want to do that. We have public parking garages across at Orange Street and at the Exchange Garage. We want people walking through our downtown and using other goods and services. And so it was a conscious decision at the time to do it.
Well, I think I appreciate Mr. Najarian's comment and feel your comments. Of course, we want the vibrant downtown. We want people to walk around and use. The economic impact is going to be very, very in a positive note for us. But overall, you set the precedent when you approve projects, and especially in downtown area. I mean, the code sets the precedent. The code did not allow this kind of a parking reduction. The parking in downtown is a lot less than the outside downtown. Whatever you have in different zones doesn't apply here. So the precedent was set when you approve a project that is not even completed yet. It's not occupied yet, so it's not 20 years ago. So anyways, I think, yes, Mr. Najarian.
Let's be careful when we use the word precedent, because it means a lot of things, and I think it'd be inappropriate to say that we've set a precedent, or you set a precedent. Did we set a precedent for no parking at all when they built the Alex Theater or the Mid-Brand? There was no parking at all required for those. Could someone go back and say, well, there was precedent then, regardless of what our current day codes say, a new project coming in should have no parking? So I think I agree with Mr. Lanzafame that each project has to be looked at individually on its own merits, and a discussion as to the benefits and costs of any variances, whether it's parking, height, setback, style, should be taken on each case individual, and not say that there's precedents already which would impose on us, the decision-making body, to decide one way or another.
Okay.
So if I can,
Mr. Sinanian,
yes,
then
thank you.
Councilman.
So a more recent project, the Masonic Lodge and the shops around it, the restaurants around it, how much parking are they providing?
I'm sorry. We're in a budget study session. We're not about parking, and I do apologize. Maybe I should have cut off earlier.
I just asked a question. All of a sudden, on my question, we're having concerns. I don't understand.
I just expressed my concern. We started off in a discussion about use of public resources and that's where this discussion related to this project. It's up to the mayor and the council if they want to have the discussion.
Well, I know that there was no parking provided. So to get on with it. It just looks strange when we start being concerned about setting precedents when it comes to a tiny mom and shop business that's landlocked, and all of a sudden everyone's concerned about setting precedents when a year and a half ago we allowed a mega project to move forward again without any parking being provided. That's the point. Of course, we don't want to make a habit of it, but if we're going to start setting some pretty strict rules when it comes to parking, we should start with these really big projects.
Okay. Councilmember Devine?
Well, is my microphone on?
No. Now it is.
Now it is? Okay, thank you. I simply wanted to say that, we're going to reach a point where we're doing these parking exceptions and we're going to run out of parking. I mean, really. So I think it's a slippery slope, and I think we have to be very careful and go project by project, big, small. It doesn't matter. I think the size matters in this case. I'm using a phrase, okay. But that's the way I feel about it. I think we have to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that we can't just keep saying, well, we have public parking, we have public parking, we have public parking, because certainly that's going to run out. So that's
Councilmember Aljani.
point.
I just want to make sure that we are not forcing the small guy to do everything, and the big guys, they come and we bend over and we give them the parking and other help we extend to them. So we have to be fair to everybody. This cannot be just for a big developer or mega developer. We are very lenient, and then for the small guy, we are so tough with them.
And one more comment. I mean, of course size matters, because if you're giving an exception to hundreds of parking spots, and all of a sudden you're concerned about single-digit parking spots, it makes no sense. The saturation or lack of parking spots obviously becomes more apparent when you've given hundreds of parking spaces away versus single digits or double digit parking away. Of course, size matters.
Okay.
Therefore, we should go. We should be more cognizant, more principled when it comes to bigger projects as opposed to smaller.
Okay.
When we talk about Flower Street, this is an improvement in the GC3 campus, dollars that have been reserved, earmarked really pursuant to a master development agreement with the Walt Disney Company to widen Flower out in the GC3 area. On the community services and parks, some of this may look familiar because Fremont Park Council had dedicated $4 million in DIF funds. That project is probably in the neighborhood of $9 to $10 million, however, but of course DIF can only fund new improvements as opposed to rehabilitations or renovations. And so, as you recall from your budget, your first budget study session, we had asked and council agreed to move $2 million from the general fund into the CSP, the CIP for community services and parks, and hence we now are sitting on 6.2, and we'll be looking and presenting strategies for council to generate the balance needed for this project.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Duke Majian is the holdover project. You recall this was funded with previous DIF monies that have been parked in this account. We are in the process of closing out the current phase. We have one final phase, as noted here, the Nature Education Center, and at that point, the Duke Majian project will be completely finished. We have the improvements there at Pacific Park, both in terms of the kids' play area, the splash pad, as well as the shade structure. Those dollars would be new appropriations by way of this coming budget. Real small amounts in the HHW facility for the fire station over at the Environmental Management Center. Grayson has quite a bit of, GWP has quite a bit of operation. I'm sorry, sir, did you have a question?
Yes, I have one quick question regarding Duke Majian. That $3 million, I remember that we were going to move from Verdugo Park budget into Duke Majian and then fill Verdugo with the IF fund. Is that what we're doing right now, or is Duke Majian is being just funded all by itself from the general fund?
I believe we have swapped those dollars out, but I'll have to confirm that. So that DIF monies, the full amount of DIF monies would not be going to Duke Majian. Oh, I'm sorry, Onik.
Mayor Garbett and members of the council, we swapped the $500,000 from DIF to from Verdugo using DIF funds.
And I believe you'll see that $500,000 in upcoming slides.
Okay, so it's basically what we planned last year. That's what we're continuing.
And that plan, the DIF plan was approved last year, March of 2016.
Right. So we're moving from the DIF fund, from Verdugo fund into Duke Majian, and then we're going to backfill Verdugo with the DIF funds.
Yes.
Okay.
Question?
It's been done already, actually. It was done last fiscal year.
Okay.
So it's a question on the parks. There's been some discussion with the school district, either on or off the record, about supplementing the funding for their aquatic complex. Can you find out if that complex is designed and set in stone, and if there is a funding gap, because they had a plan for a larger
aquatic center.
Yeah, I don't want to say regional aquatic center, but a larger.
It was CIF certified, as I recollect.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted something 50 meters by 25 yards, and I think due to their funding limitations, they shrunk that. I think 30 meters by 25 yards. So can we find out what their if there is a gap, how much that is, and maybe that can be a policy decision. Where is the money? Is there any money that the city can help out with?
Sure.
And just to find out where we're at.
And I think that was going to be our main point of discussion with the school district in our next meeting.
Okay. Yes. Yes, sir. You recall that at the outset of the discussion about whether or not to repower Grayson, that we would have some earnest money effectively put up front by way of the engineering, the IRP, the limited notice to proceed via the procurement. That's still represented here in the budgets you are about to see. We also have some water money to extend the recycled water system to our partners at the school district. You are familiar with the fiber optic plan. That lease was approved, and you'll see the commencement of that project going forward. And then the ongoing capital maintenance and replacement you see in water and in power there. Some limited improvements at our various branch libraries. You'll see the breakout there. And then, of course, in Public Works. We do have a number of improvements, the closeout of some projects, but some significant investments in pedestrian improvements vis-a-vis the Safe Route to School Phase 3 program, and the ongoing replacement of the street signs. It's funny. Think of all the things that the Public Works Department does, and probably the biggest question I get from residents most often is, when are you going to replace the street signs that are all kind of faded out? So the work is underway, and it's happening in the next, it's happening now, but it'll be completed in the next couple of years. So let's talk about Fund 101. I think we already kind of have in terms of the Lemley project. That's the only one that's there in the general fund, the CIP for general fund, and so we migrate over to Fund 401. Now, this is something that we've talked about in the past. I think the question was raised by Mr. Sananyan in terms of investments in CIP. There was a time, as Glendale had a significant amount of funding that would flow to CIP, one half of the city's sales tax at one point went to CIP, and over the years that was that ebbed away, such that by the time we got to 9-10, the peak of the recession for us, we were down to less than 1%, and then for the next couple of years, nothing at all from the general fund moved to CIP. What you see going forward, however, is it's limited, but it is a conscientious effort to start to rebuild that and dedicate actual general fund dollars back into the CIP budget for building replacement and investment. And you'll see it in projects like these. To date, we have spent non-property acquisition related. This is just the rehab maintenance of the facility. About $1 million was set aside, had been set aside for Rockhaven. There's about $89,000 left over. So if you look at the left-hand column, it is life to date of the project. These are amounts of money in some cases that are kind of legacy amounts that have been parked there at one point by a city council and then just allowed to be drawn down year over year. So you see the remaining budget there in the middle, and then the proposed budget for the coming fiscal year there on the far right-hand side. So we're not proposing to put any new money into Rockhaven, but there still is about $89,000 that is there. The $510,000 is that is shown for adult recreation center, something that is near and dear to council's heart, because even though it says adult recreation center, this money is basically waiting in a holding pattern, along with some other funds that you'll see in a bit, to be channeled over to the Glendale High School joint use tennis facility. And so the city will be bringing, I want to say about $800,000 to that project, money that has been set aside and money that will be set aside going forward. We do have the unanticipated repairs that always come up at all of our 30-plus parks, and so that money is ultimately gets used in one way or another. Ongoing renovations at Verdugo Park, that money has generally not been spent. Council had previously put away $500,000. We've only used about $14,000 of that. There's that $500,000 in Duke Mason that we had just talked about. Some other improvements, you see that we had to put aside $650,000 for Glorietta Park lighting and irrigation. We've darn near, by the end of this current fiscal year, we should have expensed out that project. So some of these you'll see, wow, there's a lot of money left over, but by the end of June 30, what we're doing is either reimbursing for costs or we're paying bills as they come in. They will be closed out by the end of the year. You see we have the normal ongoing citywide playground equipment. That's something council had talked about, the calls that you got over the last several years from residents who were complaining about the condition of playgrounds. And so we will commence to and have commenced to putting annual amounts of money in there to do those replacements. The Pacific Community Center construction, that big chunk of money that still remains, 2.7. You recall that the settlement with the contractor was about $3.4 million for the defects in the building. So as that work will soon get underway, we should exhaust all of those dollars. When you look at money going forward, I had mentioned Fremont Park, also some renovations at the Nibley Park bathroom, as well as some investments in Lower Shoal right there at the end of Glen Oaks Canyon, or Glen Oaks Boulevard. The shade structure for Pacific, and the elements, you'll see this one again and again, grant funds that we are expending, bleeding off, if you will, for the Riverwalk, the final stages of the Riverwalk for the phases that we have in place today. The final phase is the bridge over the river. That dollar amount is not in any of our budgets, and we basically will use grant funds to get us to a point where if money is secured from either Metro or from the state, that we could then move forward with the procurement for the bridge. Yes, sir.
On Riverwalk, this $975,000 grant, we had that grant, or
we had
we
grant money for the
received that 970, and we spent about 800,000 of that.
That's correct, sir.
On what? On the bridge portion?
On getting the design development for the bridge, and anything else?
Mayor Garbetti and members of the council, we have a $632,000 contract that's been encumbered for the Phase 2 construction. It hasn't been spent yet, but it's been
Phase
encumbered.
2 is not the bridge, though. It's the
No.
rest, the second.
This the second
the
part.
second part
It'll take
of
you down
that.
to the mouth of the wash there.
The half a mile that we expect.
Yes.
And 600. But that money, wasn't that money for the bridge? That grant?
No, this
Or it
was
was
the
for the
Prop 84 grant for Phase 2.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It says
the bridge
Riverwalk
grant?
LA Outfall Bridge Grant. That's why I'm referring.
This was the Prop 84 grant that we had gotten.
Okay.
In the
So-
amount of
That should be
975.
renamed. I'm sorry, sir. That is for Phase 2, not the bridge.
Right, because it
You'll
says
see
the bridge.
it again later.
So- okay, so this is for the Phase 2, that 975,000, and we still have 100,000. No, there is nothing left, basically. We spent them all. And I know there was a proposal by Assemblywoman Friedman for $20 million for the bridge.
That's
Am I correct?
our understanding, sir. Yes.
So when is that bill coming through? Do we know?
I don't know that as I sit
Okay.
here.
Okay, thank you.
You see at Station 29 as well as 26, these are important improvements to the living quarters in those two stations that would facilitate women firefighter, paramedics, and engineers, captains, what have you. So we have to make these upgrades to our fire stations. That money largely hasn't been spent, but it's been moving through project management, so the project should be completed in the coming fiscal year. And then some smaller amounts through the fire department. You see much of the closeout in the way of the library arts and culture budget. You see some of that money for branch libraries. There is some money that is still remaining. Much of what you see for library renovation is all basically encumbered and waiting for the invoices to come in, and then we can close out that budget. Same thing with the Brand Library. We will have to go through, once the project is effectively completed, we do our audits, we do all of the normal project closeout, and then officially, so we'll close it out, and you see some of those lingering descriptions in these pages.
So one quick question on the Central Library. Our contribution was $7.7 million?
Our contribution total from City of Glendale, bond proceeds as well, was about $14 million, as I recollect.
No, not the bond proceeds, from general fund. I know we gave them a $5 million loan, and then this shows 7.7 now.
About $10 million of it was bond funding, and then the remaining amount was either mitigation money or general fund money.
How much was the remaining?
How much is remaining now?
No, what was
that
the,
amount.
besides the 10 million?
The total was about $20 million
So
with those two
the
combined.
city has invested $10 million
Yeah.
on its own money. Okay, thank you. And I also want to mention on one slide back on the Riverwalk, total project cost so far was $9.2 million. Am I correct? On slide 10?
9.2 million. No, that
correct?
total is everything from the previous page, slide 9, into slide 10 shows you 9.2
Okay,
million.
got it. All right. Okay. I understand. My bad.
The normal investment, we do have to replace and upgrade the jail system, the video and touchscreen system there, $450,000. Then you'll see in Public Works, kind of ongoing, we'll consistently have the replacement of signal backups, ADA facilities, what have you. We had some work that was done in the front facade of City Hall, as well as some of the improvements that we had done in the lobby. That's reflected there. Much of that money will be charged out by the end of the fiscal year. We have the street replacement, street sign replacement, and street improvements. Again, something that the council has allowed us to do is move general fund dollars into street improvement projects to help us keep our pavement management index in excess of 72 as our index score. That's the absolute minimum that we would want to be at. Other surrounding communities are well below that, and we like people, when they drive into Glendale, they know they're in Glendale. So we continue to put those dollars there alongside with the normal transit dollars that we would put into street maintenance. You'll see this Glendale Sub-Regional Traffic Management Center in a couple of different slides that reflects where we draw money from for a larger project. And so you'll see it here and a couple other places, but the idea is to work collaboratively with our neighbors, particularly LA and even Burbank, to help to construct a traffic center that with all of the cameras, all of the technology, so we know what's happening where and what the hot spots are inside of and around Glendale. The last one is the appropriation for a landfill. We have about $28 million in this fund that is waiting for the day that the landfill will close for all the post-closure operations that go along with closing out a landfill. So what you see is that there's about $9.9 million in Fund 401 that has been appropriated and is waiting to be spent or is encumbered and soon will be spent. And then for the coming fiscal year, a little over another $9 million for new projects. So again, it takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months to bleed some of these projects down. Looking at this on a department-by-department basis, particularly in community development where we currently house all of our transit monies, you see that here in the grant fund for 216, Fund 216, we have the replacement of our fare boxes. We do that over the course of a year or two, typically, for all, well, I'm going to say nearly 40 buses or vehicles that we have in the fleet for us and for our neighbors that we provide service to. The replacement of dial-a-ride vehicles as well. Beeline, yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
In light of events in the last few days, do we need to up our budget for the transit buses?
I would say no, sir. I would hope and expect that our insurance carrier with the provider will make sure that we are whole.
We have insurance, vehicle insurance for
yes, sir.
Damage. From MV.
You see that we are putting all in. I want Audrey, correct me if I'm wrong. The total Beeline facility cost is $20 million. You'll see it here located in Fund 22, but you'll see it in other funds as well, money that has been previously appropriated as well as new monies that we are looking to apply towards that project. The procurement of buses, vehicles that you'll see under Measure R, kind of those holdover dollars from that sales tax measure, and a big chunk of the Beeline maintenance facility. We still have $8.6 million that will be used for the design build project. We have some discussion upcoming in this presentation about bus benches and shelters. That question had come up from council. We'll talk about that in just a second. But we do park some money there so that we can do some of the upgrades at benches that we feel where it's necessary, where it's appropriate, and certainly where council would give direction. Yes, sir.
Good question on the dial-a-ride. The vehicles, are these city-owned vehicles that we are investing or invested $522,000?
These are the vehicles, yes, that we would purchase that the operator operates.
And when appropriate, I'd like to have a report on the same-day service that they promised for the dial-a-ride and see how did they advertise that and what's the percentage of the community members that are using that same-day service, because that was one of the selling points for me when I awarded the contract to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will do that. And then some Prop A money, as I say, and then Prop C. Now let's talk one more. Again, you see the ultimate, the Beeline facility located here, and the tax sharing agreement that we have with Disney and the County of Los Angeles, kind of another legacy from the old redevelopment days. That project will get underway. Now, bus shelters, we have about 474 of them. Of the 474, where we have a sign only, which are typically in residential neighborhoods, because I think, as we had mentioned before, a lot of times residents don't want the scale of a bus facility in front of their house or adjacent to their house, and or become an attractive nuisance for folks. The benches are probably the most common. We have those, and we will put those for high volume areas near residential, but generally speaking, they're in commercial, and certainly the shelters, the high use locations in commercial districts. So the three kind of priorities or goals we use are we look at ADA access and furnishings, making sure that we're compliant, that we do have the basic amenities for folks who are riding the bus, and that we are safe both from a pedestrian and vehicle traffic angle. Now, the cost for these is only about $12,000 for the standard that you see on the screen.
Okay. Quick question on the advertising portion of this bus shelters. Do we control that, or we just give a concession to a company that? I believe some of them, yeah. I see some inappropriate advertising in these bus shelters. Not very often, but sure. And I know it's a freedom of speech and everything else. But I want to know what kind of control do we have, and who manages those billboards or advertising pieces.
We have a contract for the advertising, and in doing so, surrender, generally speaking, editorial control of the content. I'll defer to Mr. Garcia in terms of what the extents of that control are. But generally speaking, we allow the vendor to provide both the marketing and collection and ultimately the remission of funds. But in terms of what we can and can't do, Mike, you want to answer that one?
Sure. As a general rule, it's, as you noted, Mr. Mayor, it is governed by First Amendment. We do have some. We always have a relationship with whoever the vendor is, and can provide commentary, and they do try to monitor it that way. But we would, to some extent, relinquish the ability to say yes or no, absolutely that or not.
And how long is this contracts for? The contracts that we award to
The contract is a 10-year contract to expire in 2018 that then has a 10-year option. And so we're in the process of negotiating additional bus stops with them. To that relationship that Mr. Garcia spoke of, it is very good. And there's times when there's maybe a slip and we'll ask to swap out.
And that 10-year option, do we have that option or they have that option?
They have that option.
So automatically they can exercise their option and increase
right. And generally, and Catherine can give you more detail if you need, but the way that the market is set up, there really is one company that can do this. And so, again, we rely on that relationship to get the things that we need out of they install and maintain the bus stops.
Right. I don't want to, just comment on what only one company can do this, because I'm sure you can find 50 companies that can do the same work, but awarding these long contracts with long options, I think it's not to our advantage. So from here on, if we have opportunities like this, please bring it to the council, so council would decide as to what is the length of those contracts. So
to be clear, that was a contract that the city council entered into. We did bring it, and this is 10 years ago.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add.
Yes, Councilman.
So I think it was the last meeting, the council meeting, I asked about a report on what are we going to do about these shelters having a cover, because most of them don't, and people sit under the sun, and recently we've been having rain sit under the rain without cover. A lot of the people that use the bus stops are elderly. They're vulnerable people. So does this contract have provisions where we direct them on what kind of shelters they should be using, or how do we make them put up shelters that have cover?
We work with them to find locations where we can. And Mr. Galani can tell you there are some places where there is not the right-of-way to have a shelter. There are also instances where we don't have the Americans with Disability Act access yet. So we try and work with Public Works Department to time our improvements together so that we can make those upgrades and provide a shelter where there's the right-of-way that's available.
So over the 134 freeway is a good example. High utilization, like you see here as a bench. We may have a bench there even under other circumstances, even though under other circumstances we might have a shelter because it's high utilization, but there's insufficient right-of-way to get the 48 inches around what the shelter would ultimately be. And so even if we would want to put a bench at those locations, the right-of-way just isn't there. And so we apply that kind of matrix over the locations that get proposed.
So what's the solution? I mean, when I say solution, I mean how do we get a shelter there?
The shelter there would either be to choke down the street and create more right-of-way because you're not going to widen the bridge, or change the route, which would be impractical, to move it to an area where you did have more right-of-way. And in some cases, it just kind of is what it is because of the fact that it's a bridge, and it's not even our bridge necessarily.
So are you going to bring the report on this?
So
because
yes,
then maybe one of the things we need to look at is which one of the bus stops don't lend themselves to having a shelter there, how many of them are such, and then we can concentrate on the other ones or look for other solutions.
Certainly, I think that the provider will come forward and say, these are the areas I want to do shelters, that way I can get the advertising. Beyond that, you'll have about 11, the amount to cover about 11 shelters. It's just a function of, okay, where do you put it? And that will be the report that we bring back to you. Again, this just being a primer to show this is how it gets done.
And these 474 bus shelters, are these the ones that belong to us, or these are combined with the ones that Metro has?
That's a good question. In terms of total stops, are these ours or are they're ours? Yes.
These are all ours. Some of them are shared with Metro, but these are our stops.
Okay. And we cannot have any, do we have any leverage on the bus stops that they own that they can follow the same, basically, design and shelter and everything else, or?
I believe in Glendale, if they have a stop, it's in our right of way, so
yeah,
we have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So let's talk about community services and parks. I mentioned Pacific Park and the ongoing investment and setting aside funding for a homeless transitional housing development. We have a couple of sites that we'll be bringing to council in closed session before too long. Because we think we have an opportunity to move with our partners at Essentia to provide some much-needed shelter. The question is always where, and so that information will be forthcoming. When you look at all the other projects, again, much of this are items that have been budgeted, and we are just effectively drawing down. I would draw your attention to the Wilson Middle School field and multi-use field, and there's another one for Cerritos. Those are items that are on the council's agenda for tonight that will effectively allow for the kicking off of these projects, to do all of the environmental work, and that'll lead us to design development such that, ironically enough, Cerritos is the project that we added later than Wilson, but our expectation is that Cerritos will probably be the project that gets underway first and gets completed first.
Councilmember Devine?
On this list, can you elaborate just a little on the pedestrian paseo from Central and the Mid-City Park Development Master Plan?
The Central Park Paseo, I'm sorry, what page are you on?
That one.
On that one? The Central Park Plaza. This is money that was budgeted in our DIF strategic plan for the improvements to Central Park, really with or without the inclusion of the proposed Armenian American Museum. If we were to move forward with the museum, presuming that happens, we would be able to extend the existing paseo from right next to Mona through that parking area and into the park. So if you think of the original community or town center specific plan. It's a spine that runs east-west that will connect everything.
On the previous slide, I'm sorry, it's the previous slide?
Okay.
23.
Yeah. And it's pedestrian paseo from Central.
That money is still there. I think these are just improvements.
That money is still there, but we're combining all three of them with the Central Park Paseo. There was $2,150,000. I'm sorry, $2,150,000 allocated in DIF funds for the Central Park Plaza, but we have an additional $200,000 from we're taking that from the Mid-City Park Development Master Plan. That was a project that was established about 5 years ago to look at park locations south of the 134 between Glen Oaks and Colorado, and we're going to basically take that money and combine it with Central Park, the entire Central Park project.
Oh, okay. So then actually these two are not.
Three of them, yeah.
Or
I'm sorry,
in the plan.
Yeah, the pedestrian paseo from Central and the Mid-City Park Development Master
Will
Plan
get folded.
will get
gonna
folded
be
into the
Central
Central Park. We just have to do some
Got it.
cleaning up for next fiscal year.
And I had a question on the Wilson Middle School multi-use field. That seems like that's a huge budget. Other fields that I've either done, I think with the city or with the college, we're talking about $1 million for a football-sized field. And this is a land that, what sort of improvements are we doing around the field? I don't remember the exact, I know we had a presentation when we voted on this and all that, but that's a lot. I'd rather have two fields with less improvements than one with fancy.
Mayor Garbetti and members of the council, we're having two fields. We're going to have a U14 size field and a practice field at Wilson. We're also having a running track, and we're also building a restroom facility and a storage facility, which we're hoping it would cost a little less than $5.05 million.
Because I think the idea for us goes back to the council's original thinking is what we need is the land. And here we have the land, so we're trying to not cram as much as we can into that area, but certainly amenitize it as much as we can for the benefit of the community, because that big of an area just isn't readily available in the central part of the city.
So is this going to be has it gone out to bid yet? Or
No.
This is just the engineer's estimate that we're working on?
This is just our estimate. We are currently meeting with our environmental consultant next week on site to start the EIR process. So we're in the preliminary stages.
Going forward, when we're talking about joint use amenities, and we can bring this up at I don't know when this joint meeting is
I think it's
scheduled.
supposed to come up August 22nd will be our next meeting with the school district.
Let's talk with them about, if the city has $5 million that we can gather over the next few years, what sort of joint use would they like to see? Fields at the middle school, pools, tennis courts. There's a whole array of different amenities that we can cooperate with them. So I'd like to get their input as well.
Surely.
We're clearly short of soccer fields, but going forward, let's have that discussion.
As I had mentioned, Cerritos Elementary multi-purpose. Now, this is a smaller project because it's a smaller area that will be able to fit in just immediately south of the school buildings as they exist, just north of Cerritos Park. So it kind of gets back to the discussion or the comments you were making, Mr. Najarian. So you'll see that we try to size the amenities according to the facility. Projects in the fitness equipment seems to be a thing that most people seem to like at all of our parks, so we're continuing to invest in that pursuant to council's direction on the strategic plan. And then the ongoing kind of investment in citywide playground. We have money that's still left over, coupled with other funds. This is the Enterprise Fund, Fund 501, that soon will be collapsed into, much to the chagrin of Mr. Bulanikian, we'll collapse it back into the general fund. So these projects will still be there, be closed out as need be, the Civic Auditorium painting and what have you. But if they aren't closed out, they'll be folded back into Fund 401. Same thing here. You see the Shoal Canyon improvements. The concession stand for sports complex will be done this coming year, as well as the North Verdugo Park Community Building. All in, again, holdover funds from dollars already appropriated by council, $22.7 million, and only about $800,000 in new dollars, and that's really a reflection of kind of the cycle that we go through. Appropriate lots of money and then spend the next 2 years spending it on these projects.
Okay, question on
Yes, sir.
the replace splash pad Pacific Park. We're replacing it, right? We're not removing it.
Correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Here again, very small amount in fire station for the emergency management center. Ventilation there just needs to be done. Water and power, a whole lot of investment that we've seen pursuant to the capital program that was accompanying the last rate plan that'll come due next year. That's what you see there. The big chunk for Grayson Repower is all of the money that Mr. Zern has indicated would be kind of our upfront investment prior to the council actually deciding whether or not we will go forward. Now, you know that decision point comes next May, and we had originally anticipated somewhere around $15 million would be our upfront cost just to get to that decision point. In fact, will be probably a little bit lower than that, but close. And council will have that determination following a series of study sessions in the coming 12 months as our costs come into focus now that we have selected on a limited notice basis the provider in Siemens. You see all the other projects that have been funded, and again, we draw these down. You recall from reports previous to council, the amount of money that we invest in Grayson just to keep the facility operating has gotten to a point where the critical decision needs to be made, and as soon as we could would be ideal, because Grayson remains the most expensive element of our portfolio. So whether we close it out or not, the only unit there on site that would remain is Unit 9, our peaker unit. And what you see here is the investment. The $1.4 million is making sure that it meets all of the current federal standards. And that'll just be on an ongoing basis. But that is our newest and best unit that we have out there.
Mr. Ochoa, we've also invested in sort of setting up towards the possibility of a new Grayson, right? Is that reflected in the budget numbers, or is there anything ongoing?
All this gets us to that decision point. So council will see probably in the next several months, probably at least by the end of the summer, we'll be presenting to you conceptual footprints of what that building and what the layout will be. Because it's new technology, it'll be a smaller footprint than what we have today. But it'll also give you the opportunity, if you so choose, to economize on space by looking at some of the other facilities that we have and consolidating there in what is today Grayson. Whereas right now you probably couldn't do that because of the way it's situated.
Sure. My question is more of a numbers question. Other than the amounts that we're allocating to maintaining Grayson, and it's increasingly more and more money because it's getting older and older and harder to maintain, we've also allocating funds towards taking preliminary steps.
Yes, sir.
Towards the possibility, I guess the word is possibility of doing a new Grayson. Are those numbers
yes, sir,
reflected in the budget?
That's that 12.47 plus the 2.2 will get you, so it's just under $15 million. That'll get you to a point at this time next year, hopefully sooner, where you can confidently say we are going forward with the repower at some level, or we're not.
Okay, so it's not just
all
maintenance. All
that's correct.
A lot of it is actually not
it's just maintaining on this power management side. But you're absolutely right. Nearly $15 million to get us to that decision point. So you and the community will have absolute confidence if you decide to move forward that you've done all of your due diligence.
Mayor,
Yes.
but we already spent from the 12 million. If the remaining balance is only 2 million left, right?
There's only remaining $2 million.
So we spent the money.
You've already spent 12.4, and you're going to spend another 2.2 if you stay on the track that you're on.
So is this
Members of council, sorry, Scott. That's 12.4 is what's been total appropriated, and 2.2 is remaining. So in total, you have 12.
So it'll be 10.2 million.
That's correct.
10.2. All right. When you look at the distribution, you have no new monies, but the drawing down of existing. Grandview, for example, most of these will be closed out, I'm told by Mr. Zern, as we go forward. Grandview is by far the most significant installation. You also see, if you recall, we have our battery pilot program there. That project will be closed out by June 30th as we're finalizing all of our audit work. So the amount of money that you had earmarked previously is being spent in accordance with the overall capital program.
So exactly what was the $16 million spent on Grandview? What did we do to it?
The Grandview substation on San Fernando Road was really kind of a single point of failure for all of western Glendale, including northwest Glendale. So by doing this project, upgrading the infrastructure that's there, you're actually able to make sure that in times of crisis, we have redundancy and reliability going towards northwest. At the same time, if you recall the project that we were looking at for a solar field in Shoal Canyon, one of the asks of that provider, even though the provider has since fallen away and we aren't going forward with that project any longer, one of the asks of that provider was to do a battery pilot project. And I have to defer to Mr. Zern in terms of the number of megawatts for that project, 2 megawatt project, but that will be located at Grandview as well. So you can see it's an expensive endeavor, but it's something that is necessary.
We launched that last year, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, distribution. The power management is everything that happens at the power plant and brings in power from the western United States. Power distribution is what happens after that collection point as it moves out into the various substations and into the transformers and ultimately into the homes of our customers. Excuse me. And you see, we put and have put. I think Steve will tell you he's very proud of the fact that we had a capital budget that was moribund, to say the least, and through the rate plan that was put in place, we made good on our commitment to invest in the infrastructure, in the system, both by way of water and power. You see in these upcoming funds, the depreciation fund, we're characterizing, you see that the fund numbers across the top, characterizing what the charter would have us provide, unlike, say, the sewer fund, where everything happens within a single fund. With water and power pursuant to the charter, we call out different sources because they're listed there and have been since the 1940s. But you see all the projects here. Again, most of those should be closed out or well on their way to being closed out as we move forward in the coming fiscal year. On this last page, you see some of the limited improvements or limited investments for the coming fiscal year, as next year will largely be focused on Grayson Power Plant, what to do and how to do it. And so the last bits of it total about $6.4 million for the coming fiscal year, with $23 million in the current fiscal year set to be expended, and the majority of that, the large majority of that $23 million will in fact be closed out by the end of the fiscal year. When you look at the $8 million there as a customer paid, that's for a project where a developer will come in. They need to have electrical service in such a configuration that is entirely a private benefit to them. We charge them for that, do that work. They gladly pay it, and we have about $1.8 million is what we expect for the coming year. And generally, we have at least some amount in each year based on just the normal work that goes on in the community. On the water side, you see a very similar kind of story. We've done a lot of work by way of our system for reservoirs. Our reservoir, I can't think of the term that I'm looking for. Our reservoir system is very robust. We have a great deal of capacity in our system, where we are working now, as council will recall, in our distribution. So we're spending a great deal of money on water mains, water valves, and making sure that we don't have some of the problems that you see in neighboring agencies. When you look at our pump stations, when you look at our reservoirs, I think it shows in the infrastructure we have that we have indeed made a significant investment. Now it's time to switch the differential over to what you'll see in distribution cost. but not a whole lot new going on with water. I will show you here is generally speaking where you'll see the projects that are new. And there is some replacement up in the higher pressure zones. If you think of our water system such that we pump water uphill and allow gravity to pull it downhill, it obviously costs more to pump water to northwest Glendale, to far north Glendale, and into the reservoirs above our various canyons. And so, interestingly enough, our costs are really kind of relegated to the cost of water that we import from Met, as well as for the cost of electricity. And so we'll have about $2.9 million in the coming year, about 8.5 left to expand. And again, a good chunk of that 8.5 will be closed out by the end of the fiscal. Libraries, interesting. You see that we spent all of that money on the renovation of Central. That $250,000 remaining is likely to be used for the chiller that is there at the back of the library. If you think of that large kind of block building, that the removal will be both from library as well as some of the other projects. The reason why we want to remove that chiller is, one, we don't need it anymore with the renovation, and two, that will, if you think of it as a huge visual impediment, it'll open up that park both for the Paseo as well as for the plaza that'll open up onto the museum. And so the idea is this is not part of the library, but it is certainly part of that project as it's separated out away from the building itself. So we're looking to remove that in the coming year. And really that sets the stage for anything that the council wants to think of by way of Central Park. So if we do the museum, if we move the playground that would be constructed to the east side of the building, if you build that Paseo, all of those wonderful visions really can be unlocked by this final step of removing the chiller. When we look at Public Works probably is the most diversified department by way of where it gets its funding. You have some limited amounts of monies from special grants there, but the big chunks are going to be in terms of transit and mobility and the engineering that goes along with them. Some remaining amounts of money, again, the railroad crossings, for example, that will be closed out as we move forward through the course of the year. Big improvements coming through from Measure R sales tax dollars for transit will be bicycle facilities, but especially our resurfacing efforts, traffic signal improvements on East Doran Street as you move away from downtown. So our goal, again, is to triage the various streets and make sure we're putting money where it needs to be. Same thing with the traffic signals up off Pennsylvania for a project that is ongoing. New money coming in. The reason why those top three are asterisked is because on the street resurfacing program, we continually will put monies in there. So if I look to life to date of the project budget, that's probably in the neighborhood of $20 million looking back 10 years or so. And so the idea of giving council some degree of scale, instead of life to date of the project, we've limited the amount of time that we'll look back and show you how much money you've been putting in street resurfacing or gutter construction or street reconstruction. For the coming year, it's almost $1 million in the resurfacing project on top of the other money that the council had put in. And then $400,000 and $400,000 respectively for gutters and streets. Street tree maintenance is something that the council cares about. We're spending an ongoing good amount of money there. I know council members have asked, what about this shot beetle that we hear about that's decimating trees? You'll recall that that is one of the department's strategic goals for the coming year along with CSP. And that $85,000 treatment budget will be included in these costs or in the unanticipated expenses. Slurry sealing is also something that we do, and that'll be reflected here as well. So when you look overall, you're still putting $4.1 million into the streets by way of gas tax funds and Measure R. The way that we do CIP projects is that all of our departments basically will effectively internally contract with the Public Works Department engineering section, project management section specifically, to manage all of their projects. So whether you see something like you see here by way of these street improvement projects or projects that you think look and sound a lot like the CSP budget for some of our parks, ultimately the park management or library for that matter, they all get managed out of the Public Works Department. They get charged back to the Public Works Department. Yes, sir.
On bicycle facilities, we have on slide 43 phase 2, which is 165,000, and on slide 44 it says bicycle facilities and pedestrian. What is this project, and what are we doing?
We do share rows, we do the bulb outs, we do the ramping, we do anything that gets related to that bicycle pedestrian master plan will get charged out to these projects as we go forward. So we'll bring you a advertise for bid with a spec, and then you'll look at the specs that the engineering folks have come up with their particular cost for that job, whatever it might be, and then you'll look and say, I like this or I don't like that, or move forward with it. And then we'll put that out to bid and we'll charge back to these accounts. So there's always going to be some money in pedestrian and bike safety, but we don't necessarily charge it all down in 1 year.
Right, and this is not for any feasibility study or anything like that?
No, sir, this would not be for any feasibility study.
One other thing for Sharrows, and I know Mr. Golanian is here, the ones that we installed on Cañada Boulevard, I think these are the high-quality ones, but they're very thick, and on rainy days or early morning dew, it's the bicyclists, the ones that are street cyclers, they have an issue with that. I think it's good to talk to them because it gets wet and it gets very slippery. If you're riding your street bicycle, which has very narrow wheels, it creates issues for them. So my suggestion is to talk to them. I know the ones that we paint is not that appealing and it goes away, fades away, but the ones that are very thick, they're high quality. I don't know what the material is, but that's just a suggestion. And one last question on another $100,000 on Riverwalk Phase 2. What is this? Because I thought we funded this thing 100%, and this is not going away. It just keeps coming back, and we allocated development impact fees, the IF funds, for this project. That was, we had a long discussion about where these funds should be spent, and we was this Phase 2 $3 million or so we put in there?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, to clarify the conversation, the responses previously stated, Phase 1 is completed. Phase 2, currently we're waiting, and we have been working with the Army Corps and the County of LA to get their permits. It's taken over a year, believe it or not. So Phase 2 will come on board. We start the construction fairly soon. The reference to the Outfall Bridge and the funding that you see is to fund, it's a small bridge that closes the gap over a storm drain catch basin that separates Phase 1 to Phase 2. So all of this has been funded. What we don't have the funding for, and Mr. Ochoa mentioned, is Phase 3, the larger pedestrian crossing the wash that's approximately $15 to $20 million.
Crossing the river.
Crossing the
river.
Crossing the river,
We've
yes.
been corrected many times.
But the Phase 2 was funded. We voted for it.
Phase 2 has been funded. Council awarded the contract over a year ago. I want to say a year and a half ago, but unfortunately we've been stuck in this permitting process.
My question is, what is this $100,000 for?
This is to pay for that contract, Phase 2. Right? So you appropriated it, you awarded the contract, but we haven't started the construction, hence we haven't been able to tap into it.
So this is not new money. This is from that money that...
money.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
So just closing out Public Works before we jump into fees, you see that there is some, I had mentioned previously, the sub-regional traffic management program and the traffic management center. That'll be coming together up in MSB this coming fiscal year. We have some improvements in parking fund. And the big ones that you'll see are the closeout, thankfully, of the Chevy Chase project on the next slide. But here, discussion that we had, you see at the bottom of the page, Hyperion wastewater system. As we had explained previously, sometimes Hyperion, down in the South Bay there, from our partners in LA City, they will tell us how much they're going to expend and ultimately not expend it. That money then flows back to the sewer fund to be held for future capital projects. By contrast, when you look at the legwork on this page, the LA Glendale Reclamation Plant 5.5, in all likelihood, we will spend that amount of money in investments there at the plant, which is just on the other side of the river as you go, as you go on the 5 and then turn around and get back off on the LA side. As I mentioned, thank goodness Chevy Chase is winding down. We're about 80% of the way through that project, a little over $20 million, but $4.2 million remaining. Much of that will get closed out in Rubik. When do you think we're done with buttoning up the streets on Chevy Chase, on the Chevy Chase project?
Mayor, members of City Council, we are, as Stocha mentioned, almost 75 to 80% complete with the Chevy Chase sewer diversion. Almost all of the tunneling project portion of the project is done. The San Fernando road that was closed, a portion of it will be cleaned up and opened up on May 25th to traffic, and the operation will move up north for the open trench portion, and that will complete it by, I want to say, spring of 2018. But once the tunneling project is done, there are 2 outfalls, there are 2 sewer lines that will be diverted to Lag Warps, and we start benefiting from the lower treatment fees.
Thank you.
And you see that in terms of Shoal Canyon, we do have money still remaining in terms of the EIR, the study that's ongoing, but not a whole lot else in either sewer or the refuse fund. I will then bring you over to. This is the summary that shows you everything for the 17-18 year. All funds, $45.7 million in CIP across all of our funds, across all of our departments. So again, something that is reflecting a very robust type of investment in the public infrastructure. With that, and with your indulgence, considering it's 11:25, we'll jump into fee study, sir.
Okay.
So just a general background, and our resident expert, Mr. Arkalian, is here to make sure that I don't make any mistakes. The good news and bad news of governance in California is that we know what a tax is, we know what a fee is. And so to the extent that since Prop 13, Prop 218, and Prop 26 have been in place, we know that we basically can only charge what the cost of providing the service is, as that has been defined in case law and by regulatory fiat. And so anything beyond that that doesn't fall into a handful of categories basically is a tax, must be voted on by the public. Some of those things revolve around that which has been grandfathered in, as well as what the actual costs of the city are. And so, as you will see in just a bit, we have to pair the revenues with those costs. As I mentioned, under Prop 26, basically everything is a tax unless it meets one of these 7 exceptions. And so you can see those for yourself there. But generally speaking, if they don't fall within one of those categories, then yes, you're in violation of 26, and it is required under Prop 218 to have that voter approval. So again, on the one hand, it does constrain the ability of policymaking bodies to levy taxes and assessments, but on the other hand, it makes the world rather clear. So when folks come to you and say that, you've raised my taxes, that is categorically incorrect. You cannot raise anybody's taxes. You can't raise your own taxes. Effectively, only the voters can do that. So a user fee then is a fee that's charged on an individual for a private benefit. And it's not a tax. Excuse me. It's requested if it's requested by the payer. So I would like to have you, city, do this for me, as opposed to you, the city, saying thou shalt do X, Y, and Z. And if it doesn't cover the full cost of the services that are being provided by the city. Now, you will have latitude in terms of what you decide to subsidize, and sometimes subsidy becomes a fighting word. It becomes a 4-letter word in governance in some cases. In our case, I would say that council gets to make policy. That's your job, and in making policy, you make decisions about what types of activities you want to have the city invest in. As long as no other class of customer is subsidizing, is paying the cost for somebody else, you, the city council, have the latitude to recover or not recover the cost of providing service to a customer. So what is... Yes.
Let's go back. Where it says not a tax, no, the next one.
Next one.
where it says not a tax, the service is usually a discretionary activity requested by the payer. So like some places, whether it's commercial or residential, they are not using that garbage bin, you know? And but we charge them, even they don't have it, we charge them. They didn't ask for the service. How this fits with that sentence?
So if we have a customer that, and it's a city customer as opposed to a
city customer.
Yeah. So to the extent that you, in compliance with state law, are required to have a recycling program. Now, I'm going to charge you for the cost of that recycling program. If you cannot fit that recycling receptacle or choose not to, in some cases we've provided it and it just disappears because people don't want it in the carport, especially in an apartment building where there's no space, it's underparked as it is. Ultimately, that gets moved out someplace else.
No, this is the situation like in our office building. Trash is removed by private company.
Okay.
And we do not have those garbage bins, trash bins, the small one, what they call it.
But provided by a private hauler?
Yeah, the big, this.
Well, I mean, if it's provided by a private hauler, you have the ability on the commercial side. I want to say we have something like 30 different haulers, and we're looking to get some control over that for some of the reasons I think that you're articulating. If they're charging you for that service and you can either accommodate it, want it, and it's not required by law, then they should, I would argue, either lower your cost.
I guess I didn't explain right. So we have a private hauler comes and moves the trash.
Okay.
But then we have this trash can. We are in charge for the trash can, which we do not have. We didn't ask the city to provide us with trash can.
Okay,
we are already. They are charging us $18 or $19.
The city trash.
Well, the question is, I think, if I'm understanding it right, if you have a commercial account and your trash is being serviced by a commercial
Private
hauler,
company.
does the city charge you again
For the
trash fees
for the recycling or for the trash?
No, for the trash. And
no, they won't charge you.
they charge $18.95.
Mr. Mayor, member of City Council, Council Member Agajanian, every entity, every establishment in the city pays a basic, what we call rubbish fee, that is charged to all the businesses or commercial establishments. But if there is a private entity that provides the service, there's an extra for that collection that the city doesn't charge. But everyone pays that basic standard rubbish fee.
So even if I do not have trash can, but I have to pay for it, $18, $19.
So the understanding is that everybody generates trash, right?
If I understand it right, it's not a tax. The service is usually a discretionary activity requested by the payer. We didn't ask later. We just,
right. So
for the sake of understanding, I want to understand that sentence.
That's a good question. I think to the extent, as I mentioned at the beginning, that as a policymaking body, you may be vested by state law to levy some degree of service. And I'm going to guess that the Health and Safety Code says that thou shall have some type of trash service, that ultimately this rubbish fee that's what covers that. That is something that is vested in the city predating 26 or 218 that allows us to collect those funds, because as Mr. Galani indicates, the theory is that everybody has some degree of trash, and if we don't mandate somehow that you have trash service, ultimately some folks will opt out and not pay anything at all. And ultimately I think that's where the health and safety issue comes in.
I don't know, still I can't read that sentence and understand that the person who did not ask for a trash can will be charged even minimum amount of money, because it doesn't correspond with that sentence. That's all I'm saying. That
I believe, Councilmember Agajanian, that to differentiate is that it's a fee that we charge and not a tax. So what the slide refers to, not a tax, is what we charge, which is the basic fee.
Okay. I don't mind to pay $18, $19. It's just.
So here, graphically represented is an example here. So if somebody wants a building permit, or in this case, some recreation programs. I want to take a dance class or a baking class. That's entirely of my volition, and it's entirely private benefit. as opposed to maybe the quasi-public benefit associated with the charge that you're describing. Because there's a public interest in public benefit and health and safety. And so that's entirely appropriate. It doesn't have to be, but it's entirely appropriate to recover 100% of the cost from the user as a user fee. Youth programs, you could say that there is some public benefit to that, giving kids after school something to do, and council may say it is absolutely a public benefit and we want to subsidize 100% of the cost of that. Or you may say, as you see with our day camps, as you see with the One Glendale program, we'll charge a nominal fee. We'll recover some costs so that there's some investment by way of the participants in the program. Day camp in particular, I take that back. I think One Glendale doesn't charge a fee for participation. And so council, again, gets to make policy in terms of what you invest in and what you don't invest in. Historic preservation, you start to see that the differential shift. That there is some private benefit, but there's also some public benefit if you agree with the premise that preserving historic properties it has a public benefit in terms of preserving the identity of a place. But there also is undeniably some private benefit, and so you see that differential shift. Something that would be categorized as 100% public benefit would be those public safety services that opting in or opting out really doesn't quite work for as a paradigm. How do we go about creating the fees and charges that you'll see that you have in your book? We take the fully burdened hourly rate. That is all of the costs, as we have shown in previous presentations, for a given classification that provides the study. We then take the estimated time of that person in the study. It takes them to process the application, process the permit, process the service, whatever it may be, taken to the nearest quarter of an hour, and then apply any other special materials or supplies. Ultimately, we take the outcome of that equation, and that becomes the ceiling, the maximum fee amount that we can charge. And you can see that in your booklet, we have over 2,350 fees for service. We will update the fee, the cost study that the cost study that the fees are based on is updated every 3 to 5 years. In fact, I think next year we'll be coming back again to reset the table, as it were, by way of the fees. Excuse me, and the city's cost. I think it's noteworthy if you look at the 2350 and the universe of fees, if you will. There's no changes to about 1484 of them. We're deleting or restructuring, and decreasing about 51 fees. That's a function of a restructure of the way that various departments want to do their business. We're increasing about 47 fees, increasing those 47 fees separate and apart from what we would do by way of the CPI increase. So I think CPI for this purpose is 2.1%. So 737 fees of the 2350 will be increased by CPI. The other 47 are fees that we have brought to council, saying that when we first did our fee study several years ago, we were way behind what the cost to provide the service was. However, the council did not want to shock anybody by jumping from some nominal amount because the fees had never been increased to what the fully burdened rate is. Instead, the council said, take this in bite-sized chunks, increase it by 25% or 50% or whatever the case is, but it will be in excess of the 2.1% CPI. And then lastly, where I imagine we'll spend a good chunk of our time is on new fees. Some of these are rather mundane by way of rental of facilities. Others represent new looks at programs for services that are being provided today, particularly in the fire department.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr.
I looked at the booklet and I saw some of the fees has been deleted. What it means by 48 of them is deleted, then what happens? We are not charging the previous.
Well, I thought these slides right here deal with the deletion.
Right.
And so what you see is that the departments have decided they're going to change the way that they do business. And you'll see this with some of their, here we have parking and in other cases library. So filming fees, this is a good one. Filming fees, film students, so it's a discounted rate for student films. at the Chevy Chase Library. So we were providing a fee, the charging a fee of $15.46. What the department is going to change to is say we're going to go on a per hour basis. So the fee itself is just being restructured in a way we still may charge for that activity. By the same token, you look at the deletion of existing fees. The alarm fees are being restructured in a way that will reward those folks who don't have false alarms, but have a penalty of increasing the recovery of what our cost is for responding to false alarms. You'll see here some of the other fees. The on-scene assessment fee is being restructured, and we'll show you some of the fire fees in just a second. But generally speaking, these are fees that we just don't provide this level of service. And we also, in your booklet, probably you've noticed the frequency with which the various services get provided. If we aren't providing a level of service, no one actually requires us to provide this service, then we'll just strike the fee because it doesn't need to be there. It only serves to confuse people if we're charging a fee for a service no one seeks. So again, not too much on the fee deletions or decreases.
I have a question on the marketplace parking. Do we have a daily rate, like if you're there for 10 hours? What's the daily rate for parking there?
We do, and it's not even it's free. It's $1 for the next hour, up to a maximum of
$9.
$9. Okay, because I'm looking at the rental fee that we're charging, and they're paying $70 a month divided by 30 is maybe $2 a day to park their cars there. Is there any way of or did we give any thought to increasing that to like $5 a day? Or, I mean, it's taking up our valuable parking and...
Excellent idea.
Thank you, Mr. Gawanian. I knew you were...
If I may answer that too, Mr.
Please.
Mayor, members of the City Council, we are proposing some increases. It is in our slides coming up. As you remember, last year we recommended to increase some of the parking garages, and we're kind of doing the same thing just to keep up with the market, as you mentioned. So, but we're trying to do it gradually, not increase it to the max amount.
So this $10 is the gradual upgrading.
Even with the $10 increase, we're still not at the market.
I know. Why aren't we? We're at market for everything else. Why aren't we at market for parking?
Certainly we can.
That's your decision.
This is one of those ones where we were so far behind that going up to market would be in excess of what I think council members have thought was a shock to the system.
Right.
But certainly, as a policy-making endeavor, you have that ability.
Are there any other?
Doesn't TPC handle the parking regs?
Yes.
I mean,
but they make
have final
recommendations to you.
jurisdiction. They don't have final jurisdiction.
You have final jurisdiction.
Mr. Mayor, Miami City Council, Councilmember Devine, if I can just share with you a market survey analysis that we had done. Average around the city is $79
per month.
Per month, and they go up to a maximum of $92.70.
Well, it seems that if we're giving up this parking, and we keep doing parking exceptions, and so I think the city ought to be able to recoup, I think, or to somehow validate this rental that we're doing, that we're giving up these parking spaces, and to only charge them
What page are you on?
a minimal amount. This is page 24 in the booklet. In the booklet, Councilmember Najarian.
Slide are you on?
Oh.
Is this the slide 62?
I'm in the book. I'm in the
she's in the
booklet.
fee book.
I'm in my
No, I
fees.
understand, but where was it in the where was it?
Yeah, these are just the highlights. When you look at, let's go to increases for Public Works. Here we go. If you look at slide 64, that has some of the information.
Yeah. Okay, what is your proposal, Madam Mayor? I mean,
Slide
Councilmember
64.
Devine?
Well, the
I see.
fee increase for marketplace parking, in other words, those, I guess it's car dealerships that are renting these spaces, am I correct?
No, they get a
What?
for a grade.
Mr. Mayor, Member
Yeah.
City Council, Council Member Devine. Actually, we used to have quite a large number of car dealership who park their cars there, but we have gradually been reducing that number. So these are monthly users who are employed in our business district that use the parking structures for parking on a regular basis, 5 days a week.
Okay. We could still, but I'm suggesting that the
This is a
I would
15%.
suggest you
uses-
bring this back and
Yeah.
then discuss it, because there's a lot of nuances in parking.
Yes,
If you
yeah.
charge too much, then they park on the streets.
Right.
If you charge too little, then, they will drive when they could find
Right.
other.
And I apologize. I
Sources.
thought that this was
just the auto dealers?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I thought this was referring to, the monthly.
And Councilmember Devine, you are correct. If the car dealerships were to use these spaces, they will pay that monthly fee as well.
Well, then
But
that's
currently, there's a handful of minimal numbers that they are being parked at Orange Street Garage. At the Exchange and Marketplace, we don't have any car dealerships anymore because of the high demand.
Which reminds me, let's look at the Hilton parking on another subject. City attorney didn't hear that.
The Hilton parking.
So our thought process was, like Armin mentioned, to increase it gradually. Next year, we were going to propose another $10 increase.
Okay. If it doesn't involve that many of the car rentals,
Car dealers.
Yeah, by and large,
Parking?
today, this will be the folks who work in downtown.
okay. Well, all right. I don't know that I want
Let's
to
look at,
penalize
I mean, I
it.
think it's good to
The
review
whole
it.
point of this is
Yeah.
for you guys to say, you don't have to make the decision today, but to
Okay.
say, bring us back more information
Okay.
about the parking.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
certainly, as we take notes, this will be something that comes back to you.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Let's go back to increases to now we're talking about increasing fees, and again, this gets to the above the CPI, above 2.1%. What we're seeing is the increase in or the request for wireless communication facility applications. This is just to process what their cost is. Now, our full cost is a little over $1,000. Now, one of these providers comes in, they say this is where I want to go. We have to look at any number of background information to make a determination. Today, we charge $526. We are looking to recoup from the telecom companies the full amount of $1,000. Similarly, when they request an encroachment permit, if we do it or if we have an outside expert review, it's basically cost recovery. And here we're a lot closer because previously if we do outsource the cost to an outside consultant, we'll just pass that along. So there we're going from 526 recommended or 526 currently to 564 recommended. When we talk about parking, we went through some of this. We will bring all of this information back to you because I think both Councilmember Devine and Councilman Najarian bring up a good point. Where you stand depends on where you sit. We want to encourage folks to use our downtown parking, but we don't want to make it too convenient, but we don't want to make it too expensive, so there's a sweet spot somewhere in there. We hear you loud and clear. We will bring that back. The auditorium fees in terms of libraries. So we talked about some of the restructuring. Here, the current fee is $50. We would look to go towards $75. This would allow us to eliminate some of the other, the kind of large lump sum fees that we were charging and make it hopefully a little bit more accessible to folks because the cost is relatively less, reflecting ultimately what they need to do or want to do with this new facility. And we do expect with a new facility, people are going to want to use it. CDD, these are ones, probably the best examples of this notion of going above the CPI. All of these, generally speaking, the council's attitude has been in alignment with what we've heard today. For projects that typically revolve around applications from homeowners and from the quote-unquote little guy or gal, then we have inched our way towards cost recovery. But for those things that really were owing to large development merchant builders, the council's attitude has been to recover full cost and do it sooner than not.
Question. Mayor?
Yes.
On the, this would be on page 36, probably, I guess slide 36, or I don't know if you have it up there, but it's the fee increase number 19. request for extension of time, request for permit extensions. Now, I know we have some issues, or an issue, of a property in the city that keeps getting extensions. Is there, have we thought about doing like a step increase? Like if you're asking, your first increase is, first extension is 158, and let's say your next extension will cost you 200, and the next extension will, to kind of eliminate or to stop people from just leaving a property in disarray or, a mess while they just keep getting extension after extension? Or would that be counterintuitive and they would just kind of stop getting extensions?
Hey, that's one of those ones. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Which item is this again?
This is it's number 19 on page 36. It's not on the slides, I don't think.
I see.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, because if right now our philosophy has basically been, let me help you get your project done. And believing that everybody earnestly wants to get it done, but for whatever reason can't do it. If there is a property owner or a builder out there that maybe it doesn't have that same level of earnestness and sincerity to get a project done, but rather they're okay to make themselves an attractive nuisance, one thing council could do is require that on ongoing permit extensions, we have to do some type of review on that particular application and charge back for that review. So certainly, I don't know that we can make that today, but if that's something that council wanted us to investigate, we would bring back, under the advice of city attorney, bring it back in such a way that it is lawful and reflects cost, but it also serves as something that will keep people on that straight and narrow, that they just don't punitively or against the neighbor if they're having a neighbor dispute, or recklessly decide, well, I'm not going to get this project done. But it will add cost, most certainly.
I think we're talking about two different things, because what I'm getting from Councilmember Devine is the projects that started and they're dragging it and dragging it.
Yes.
But this is not what that says. This is for extension on your permits. So if you obtain a permit, you have 6 months to start.
Right.
How many extensions do we give before they start the project?
I think that's your point, is that we give extensions based on progress. For some cases,
Some we have projects that have languished for 12 years because.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is this. My question is, if I pulled my permit and I haven't started my project, I have a house, I want to add a room to it. I haven't started my project. I pulled my permits. I know I have 6 months to start the work. How many extensions do we give them from the day they pull their permits? Haven't started the project yet. If they don't want to start the project, they want to get an extension, they can get an extension on that.
They can come in and get an extension. I'll defer to Phil and Jan. I don't know how often that happens as much, because there's a fee associated with that, as opposed to I'm going to do minimal progress and call for an inspection, and now I don't have to pay the extension fee.
Sure, that's what it is. Within 6 months, you have to get one.
Do we know how often that happens, Phil?
Well, I'm sorry, we were conferring when the last question got it, but the one prior to that, how long? Typically, you could extend the building permit. Before you start, you could extend it as long as you want. But you have 2 years on design review.
Right.
So your entitlements will naturally expire the project if you haven't gotten started. No matter how many extensions you get on the building permit, until you start, you've got 2 years, and then we can only give one extension on design review. We only one a year. So within 3 years, that's the max time that you could get.
You have to start your project.
You have to start your project.
And if you start it and you pull one permit, that's what you're referring to. They get one permit, they wait 6 months, they get another permit, they get 6 months. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and then the project languishes there in disarray, and it becomes a nuisance. And so I'm just trying to figure out with staff a way that we can either try to prevent or if someone's going to just try to stop that behavior. I know it doesn't happen a whole lot, and I'm not trying to stop development or building or anything else. I'm just trying to somehow mitigate the situation where a project languishes for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. I mean, that's
Something
what I'm
unreasonable.
trying to do, or something
It's
reasonable.
typically substantial work has been done on the permit. We have looked at 20%. So you would have the life of a permit, all things being equal, of 5 years, where somebody's project. We've tried to balance that and use other factors. Somebody's got money in the ground and they want to get it done and they want to occupy. That's typically what we see. As you know, there are those exceptions where they might languish longer, and then we try and work with the applicant to move the project along.
Okay.
So we can bring you back options on that, again, pursuant to what the city attorney would kind of bound us by, to make sure it's not just punitive, but it is reflecting the cost on the organization, the community.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So yes, ma'am. So you see some increases here. Again, we're trying to march towards full cost. In some cases, still not getting there because, as council has dictated previously, in cases here is a good one. The owner or contractor wants to go through the processing fees to change their permits. Right. Our cost is $89. The current fee is $62. We're recommending $65. Pursuant to what council has given us in the past. Same thing with the next one on the minimum fee retained for refunds. So we're trying to provide some relief to those smaller builders, but for larger projects, recover full cost. Plumbing permits, a good one. $103 is the fully burdened cost. We're at $50. We're recommending $75. Next year, we'll probably recommend $100 if council wants us to go that rate. But you get the same theme here for all of these that are the increases from CDD/building.
If you go back one slide, on slide 66, I have a question on item 27. Is it 27? No, fee number 27. The building permit fees and valuation. I believe we talked about this last year as well. When it comes to the valuation of the work, our valuation is kind of a little on a higher side, like, I don't know, a roof repair or roof replacement, for example, is $40,000. And you replace your windows is $40,000. Then you come value the house itself, because they compare the work that's being done to the value of the house, and then the house is valued at $250,000, and you trigger that 50% rule. And then they ask you to do sprinklers and everything else. I think the valuation of the properties have to change and to be based on current market value. I don't know if we have done that or not, but we had a case that the house in Verdugo Woodlands, a 2,300 square feet house, was valued at $275,000. And I don't think you can buy gum in Verdugo Woodlands for $275,000. So that triggered that 50% rule, and I think that happens more often than not. So that's something that we need to look into as well.
I'll let us look at that, because that'll be a question of the extent of our authority, and what latitude do we have to establish that market value that you're describing?
They have a book.
Yeah,
they refer to it in a book. So
if we are changing the way that we're operating, it'll have to be conditioned upon what that index is and how we do. If that's not how we're doing it today, then understanding how we would migrate to that. We'll get you an answer on that.
Thank you.
So again, you get the same type of look here on these permit fees. Electrical, same kind of thing. Again, marching towards the full cost, but not recovering the full cost. Generally speaking, these are smaller projects. When you get to, who are we on here? These are for the police department. As I mentioned, we restructured some of those alarm permit fees in a way that we are able to reward those good actors and charge some of the other folks who are the ones who might waste time and resource wantonly, that we will charge them a bit more, although it's still within the framework of the fees. So you see, even here under the commercial permit fees, for a lot of our smaller businesses, $732 is the actual cost. We're recommending to get to $160. When we look at, again, false alarms, you get an idea. In no case are we really just sticking it to those folks who would have the second alarm but at the same time wanting to recognize that there is a cost, that if you do not take care of your alarm and have it serviced appropriately, you're basically wasting everyone else's time and money.
Yeah, but I want to go to that because this happened to me personally, and every time you leave town, your alarm activates like 12 times, and they cannot get a hold of you. But I think these numbers are excessive. Even $300 for the first false alarm, just because nobody wants to call the police when they don't need to. And the second one, $420. I think these numbers are very excessive, and it has to be looked at.
Well, I mean, if you're telling us that the council believes that they should be lower, certainly we can bring them in lower. These are fees that you charge that get subsidized by general taxes, not by another class of customer. So you have latitude.
Right. I think we need to look into that as well.
So we can bring you a range on these as well. Again, the CPI adjustments are the largest chunk of fees. So all the other fees that you haven't seen represented as yet and that are not new fees, we're recommending are adjusted by 2.1% to keep up with consumer price index.
So every fee is going to be adjusted according to that CPI? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Unless increased beyond this amount, like we just showed, or decreased or deleted.
Have we done that in previous years? Or
yes.
Every year you have a CPI adjustment on our fees?
Every year that I have been here since we have done a fee study, we have. And part of the issue was we didn't increase fees at all, we just zero them out, and then get to a point where we had to increase fees by a significant amount. So it's kind of like an accordion. Either we do it a little bit at a time, or you don't do anything, which is certainly what council can do that. But then you have a bigger jump later on.
Mr. Ochoa, if I may, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the CPI adjustment actually does not apply to every single fee. Because there are some rate-based fees in the fee schedule too. This is basically just for the clarification.
Sure, yeah.
It's only applies to the user fees, whether we've done a study or not. And last year was 3.1% CPI adjustment, and the prior year, I believe we did not recommend any CPI adjustments.
Because CPI was next to nothing.
That, and also we did a fee study. So normally when we do a fee study, we try to look at the fees that are changing. So if we're going to increase it based on the cost, then we don't recommend any CPI adjustments then.
I want to say in the year that we didn't do it, I mean, CPI was less than 1%, as I recollect.
Correct. Yeah, one year was negative
year.
0.01%. Yes.
After you changing these fees, what eventually the money which city will collect will amount to?
I will show you that in just a second.
Councilmember Devine.
My question is about the Mills Act and the fees. They're not increasing. We increased them last year with a lot of kind of contentiousness, but and you it says frequency 6, and what I want to know is have we had 6 requests for the Mills Act? Has this raise in fee slowed down the requests for the Mills Act? And I don't know who would have the answer for me.
I'm seeing shaking heads, but Phil will come and answer.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Councilwoman Devine, I think we have 4 Mills Act applications, and there may even be a district that is coming. But I think the number that we were just looking at was 4 at this point.
And if I remember correctly, the average is usually about 4 or 5.
4 or
correct?
5.
So
correct.
it's not really impeded the request for a Mills Act.
But how much was the increase?
The increase went from about $1,200 to, I want to say, $35 if you got it in the book.
Actually, what we did last year, it was a flat fee, but then we, per council direction, we made it into a tier system. So I think it's based on the valuation, where before that it was just one fee and it was much higher, I believe.
Okay, great. Good to know. Thank you.
So new fees. This is an area that certainly is going to generate some interest. Some of them are rather mundane, so people that want a copy of the popular annual financial booklet, the cost is just the copying cost. Basically, we're passing along $10. Filming is a big issue. We get lots of requests for filming, so you saw that we were eliminating some methods in which we were doing the filming, and in some cases going to an hourly rate for minimum set hours. In other cases, for the student rates, we would do a lump sum, but that's in reflection of what the market is. So I want to say that we're still below what neighbors on either side of us are for student films, discount rate films for some of our facilities, which are actually quite popular. When you look at photography, same kind of thing. You'll see a big jump, inclusion of a fee for a mural. This is something that has crept up into our consciousness by complaints, honestly, from residents, especially those residents of budding commercial and retail districts, saying that folks, building owners, have wanted to adorn their buildings with murals, and there's really no design review to it. And thus there's no public say in any public review. So we put this amount out by way of what the cost is to process, but think of it more as a flag that we are planting in terms of there is a cost, and you can charge up to $3,200 for this cost based on staff time. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to charge $3,200, because as you saw in previous slides, we're talking about public benefit, private benefit. You could argue that there is some public benefit to a mural, and maybe that's something that the council wants to offset, but should it be really kind of undetermined at this point, because we don't have such a fee for mural review. And so again, this is just a placeholder for council for your direction.
Councilwoman Devine.
So this is an amount that is paid by the muralist or
property owner, probably.
Property owner who wants to put a mural
Correct.
on the building. And what happens to those that are already there that we've had an issue with?
I mean, if they're it depends on if they're in a code enforcement process or not. I know for one example, it is in fact in a code enforcement process, and that will have to be abated. But Phil?
That's correct. And we've asked them to then go through design review. Depending on if and when this fee gets implemented, they would pay that. Right now, we don't have a mural fee, so it's a design review fee that is imposed, and that it's more than what is required out of this. The recommendation there is based on the work that we would do for a sign program. And so it's the fee is similar to that.
So the mural review will go to design review, or will it go to Arts and Culture Commission?
It actually goes to design review. In our code, it requires it to go to design review.
Even though it's supposedly art.
And
Yes, ma'am.
And the design review fees, how much?
It's about $6,000.
Oh, yeah.
For design review is about $6,000.
Okay.
And so again, we've recommended something that is similar to a sign program.
So what is this $3,000 then? If design review is $6,000.
That's the recommended.
The recommended amount is to treat it more like you would a sign.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's less of a fee.
And that's probably a much more analogous cost until we do the fee study that Armin talked about in the coming year. But again, it's kind of planting a flag. You could charge. We think we make a good argument. If you're going to charge fully burdened cost, that's $3,200 or $3,203. If council says that no, we should be something less, you can make it less.
Would there be a fee if it went to Arts and Culture, where they deal with art?
You would have a cost because this is the staff cost to prepare the item and then bring it forward to the commission
So it'd be the same, basically. Okay.
And then you willy-nilly become involved in what's a mural versus just graffiti. I mean, right? Who makes that judgment call?
In this case, it would be through design review. It would be that body, or it could be the Arts and Culture Commission, or it could be any which way that we want to set that process up. Understanding that we probably need some type. This particular code enforcement case has brought up that we need to have some type of process. Yeah. If we're going to have some type of process, there's some type of cost, and then the question becomes, do you recover that cost? So it's another good one that you get to decide. Do we subsidize it? Do we not? How does that process flow?
So you expect us to decide on this June 13th?
At the latest June 13th. So we'll be providing. June 6th is the hearing. June 13th is the vote.
So there will be a report on this? Or are we going to?
Yes. So if you tell us, example, if you say, this just seems way too high, or it's inappropriate, or I don't even know if it's inappropriate or not. Bring me more detail. We'll bring you more detail in advance of June 3rd.
When do we tell you that?
Today.
Today. Yeah. I think bring us more detail because, again, there's a public interest to having public art, and we don't want to set a review standards, monetarily so high where we're discouraging art and discouraging artists from creating that art. But at the same time, I understand there's got to be some kind of a process. And right now, apparently, the fee that would apply is twice as much as this, almost twice as much.
If you were to use the standard design review,
yeah.
Okay. The ADU fee for the review of an accessory dwelling unit, we've asked, you have directed, at least during this interim period of time, that we would treat that effectively the same way we treat room additions. And so you see it's $288 for the review of that. Wireless telecommunications. This is something that the folks in planning don't charge today. This has been largely handled in Public Works and/or GWP, but there is cost that accrues to the planning division, the planning staff, and so we're looking to recover that. You also see some in the community development and neighborhood services. This is for the administrative fine program. So somebody who is being hit with an administrative fine for either non-conforming uses or indigenous tree damage to it, or they didn't get a permit. $400, $1,000, $200 or $2,000 would be the amounts that could be levied through that administrative fine program.
What determines 400, 1,000, or 2,000?
It's based on occurrence. So the first time would be 400. The second time, unless you've corrected the violation.
Okay.
Now to fire department, where you'll see something that's a little more significant. Above ground storage tanks in general have become much more of a focal point for the fire department as the regulatory body for this area. And so there are inspections that we will do and permits that we will issue, and so we want to make sure that we are not subsidizing private actors, usually industry and or commercial actors, with the permitting of their tanks. And so what you see is the actual cost, and this is what we would seek to have as a established permit, again, for folks with the various size tanks that you see. So the larger the tank, the more the cost for the permit and what have you. And you see for underground storage, same kind of dynamic, although it's a little more straightforward, ironically enough.
Underground tanks, so the size doesn't matter?
For the underground storage tanks, when you look at the type of inspection that we're doing, whether it's they all have to have some type of secondary containment at this point if they're lawful. So it's rather straightforward as to the inspection that we provide, the inspection that we do. So size generally does not matter in that case if it is a lawful, permitted, modern tank that's met all the qualifications. It has all the bells and whistles already. So our cost should be pretty straightforward.
So we're not charging anything at this time for any of these services?
At this point, these are brand new fees.
So if there's a, like, item, I don't know, 149, if it's an underground storage tank, inspector witnessing of monitoring equipment, it's not being done at this time?
If it's being done, it's being done in a different way. Armin, I would defer the cost that we're charging.
If I may, these are based on the cost analysis. So we do have the existing fees that we charge for the other type of permits. And normally what we've done, if it's inspection related, then if staff has to go out, then we have those fully burdened hourly rates, and we'll probably base it on that just to recover some of the cost. But what I understand, these are brand new, and it's recommended by the
I'll ask the chief, maybe.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the answer to your question is actually this is a new fee added to the recent state regulations that the state has handed down to all CUPAs. A CUPA is a Certified Unified Program Agency. And because we have to have we have to track all above ground storage tanks within the city, starting with only storing hazardous materials. So all these above ground storage tanks have to be monitored in CERS, which is the California Environmental Reporting System. It's a computer database that you can go online and report these things. So because of that, there's a cost incurred that have not been incurred in the past. So that's why this is a new fee.
Because of the new regulation, you
exactly,
have to have extra
because of the new
inspections.
state regulations.
You'll see in one of the goals for the fire department and public works department in the coming year is to do a study to ascertain whether or not we want to remain the Coupa for all the local area.
And who has these hazardous waste material storage tanks? Are these like commercial entities?
Commercial,
or?
yes.
Okay.
Commercial businesses have above ground storage
So this
tanks.
wouldn't apply to tens of thousands of residents?
No, sir.
Are we talking about like San Fernando Road? Most
Yeah,
of them are down?
industrial, commercial. Gas stations. Yeah, generally speaking, not homeowners. No, not residential.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
So rather straightforward. The larger one, don't even sit down, Chief. We today do not charge an inspection fee on hazardous vegetation in the high fire zone for inspections in those properties located in the high fire zone. And so we have the authority to do it. We really never have done it and have relied almost exclusively on the County of Los Angeles. However, I don't think, as the chief will tell you, that the County of Los Angeles and its inspection, it is cursory to say the least. So I think that today we have an opportunity, if we are going to provide a level of service. Right now we have a fire company go out and do its inspection. That cost is being borne by the entire community as a general tax, as opposed to charging in this case what's being recommended, a $15 fee to offset the cost of that of those personnel, as the chief will talk about the way that we would do the inspection, to go out and do those brush area inspections that really benefit the people that live in the brush interface. So is there a benefit to the entire community? Well, you believe, yeah, that containing a brush fire to those neighborhoods, that there is a benefit to the entire community. However, the most direct benefit are the people that live adjacent to hillside areas. And Chief, is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, so as Mr. Ochoa articulated, we are in a unique situation in Glendale. We have urban interface with wildland. And so because of that, the state of California came out back in 2008, 2009, and they described what is known as a very high fire hazard severity zone, or just known as a high fire zone. The reason why this is important is because now we have to go out and we have to inspect everybody's parcel to make sure it's safe, so that it does not contribute to a wildland fire that gets out of control when the winds blow. As you remember back in the College Hills fire back in the day, we lost 62 homes to that conflagration in the city of Glendale. So we're getting ahead of it by inspecting these lots, and there's within the very high fire hazard severity zone, there's over 13,000 lots. We're going to say that basically the ones we're going to be asking to pay the fee are about 8,300. Okay, so for a number of reasons, they're not going to qualify because they're not within 100 feet of a structure, or there's a variety of other things. The county actually requires that you can't bill twice on an inspection. So if the county bills them, we're not going to be able to bill them. But on the fees, 8,300 is how many people we have in the high fire hazard severity zone. $15 is basically $125,000 to cover the cost of what we do on our engine companies and have an inspector maintain a database that's going to allow us to have documentation on every single one of these inspections.
But isn't that what you've been doing for all of these years?
What we have been doing is we've been doing inspections, but we've not been documenting it. We've only been documenting the violators. And so what we want to do, and that's about 700 to 800, what we want to do is we want to have documentation that it's been occurring to every lot in the high fire zone. Mm-hmm. That's the key. So there's accountability at the end of the day. Did we actually lay eyes on every parcel? Yes, we did.
So the software that we'd be purchasing will generate the letter that goes to you to say your property has been inspected. There is a record of it, as opposed to you're just waiting for somebody to give you a violation.
I have a question on that. So I'm concerned with the overlap of the county's duties. Let's say county says I'm okay, you say I'm not.
No, if the county says you're okay, you'll be okay. We won't inspect those ones that the county inspects. We're only going to inspect.
Don't they inspect?
No, they do a lot of the undeveloped areas way up in the hills. They'll go on private property and determine if there needs to be clearance. this would be a benefit to, I live across the street from the undeveloped high fire hazard area. I'm going to have to pay $15 to get a certification that the fire company went out there and they made the inspection on the area, in and around my home. And they'll do that for everybody in the high fire zone, which is about 10% of our households. So,
but doesn't county do that? I mean,
the county doesn't.
We get that whole list every year, and we assess the penalties.
Yeah, those are going to be for the undeveloped parcels that exist out there.
Only undeveloped.
I believe so.
Yes, anything that's not within 100 feet of a structure.
Right.
Any parcel that does not have anything within 100 feet of a structure.
This will be within 100 feet of a structure.
Yes, everything that's, what we're asking for is the 8,300 parcels are where there is hazardous vegetation within 100 feet of a structure.
You abut or adjacent to the high fire hazard zone.
And will you do the enforcement then?
We will also do the yes, we will.
If you don't clear it, do we clear it? I mean,
no,
does the city take it?
What we end up doing is we have contractors out there that go out and clear it for us. So we will inform.
That's what I mean.
Yes, there will be consequences if you don't clear your brush. First, to the tune of about $351 for the fee. If you don't clear your brush and we have to go out and clear it for you, a processing fee of $351 plus what the contractor is going to charge you to clear your brush on your lot. Again, this is all with the idea of making sure that there's value and safety within our high fire zone. We want to make sure that whatever house or structure, for that matter, in that zone is protected should we get a wildland fire, a fast-moving wildland fire.
Does that include dead trees?
That includes dead trees, yes. It includes all vegetation.
Logs and trunks, tree trunks that have fallen and...
All the above, yes, sir.
So we have 8,300 undeveloped lots in Glendale?
No, developed. Those are developed.
Oh, developed. Okay.
So the county.
I thought you said undeveloped.
No, the county gets all the undeveloped and
got it. Okay.
So in a sense, it's kind of the downside is that folks who've been conscientious about clearing brush and making their properties safe are going to be somewhat penalized by having to pay $15 that they otherwise wouldn't. All in the interests of the common good, I guess.
Again, what we're doing is we're saying that we want to document it. Right. And should something happen that would be unfortunate in a particular neighborhood, we want to make sure that, yes, we in fact did that and we have the documentation to show it. That's all it is.
And I agree that it's the right thing to do, and obviously it's going to take resources, but I'm saying I hope they don't perceive it as some kind of collective punishment.
So to give a little bit of background, if you look at the city of Burbank, they don't charge anything unless you go to court. Pasadena charges $155 for the inspection on the re-inspection, provided that you do not have a problem. The city of Los Angeles charges $24 on the first inspection if they have to go out and be inspected. So,
but you're saying if they have to go out and inspect it, isn't this sort of blanket? We're going to inspect every.
We're going to inspect every lot, yes.
Yeah.
In the high fire zone.
In the high fire zone.
So it means, again, folks that have
who own houses in the high fire zone in the hillsides, adjacent to the hillside, generally speaking, have a pretty expensive home.
But you can't think of it that way. I mean,
but the $15 is paying for the software and the
oversight of the program.
$15 a year, not right?
$15 a fiscal year, yes.
Yeah, not a month.
No.
$15 a year. Yes, Mr. Agajanian.
Do we give the homeowner a clearance or a letter saying you're
Yes,
okay?
we will provide the homeowner with a document. They actually will be able to access their account on this software, on the internet, and they can go in and they can actually see whether they're in compliance or not.
Okay, if then something happens, the city will not be liable for the...
City will not be liable, no, because again, we're putting the notice to the every week. First of all, we go out and we do a mail out every single March. Is it, Doug? April. Every April, we send everybody in the high fire zone a mail out that we're requesting that you clear your lot of any noxious vegetation. If that's done, then they're in compliance. If that's not done, then we take the next steps.
No, but I was saying then if fire happens, house goes on fire, and they come and say, you gave me a clearance, and see what happened because...
Well, no. I mean, ultimately, there's certain things, acts of God, when you have severe winds
But if their insurance company came out and said that it was because of your property having overgrown weeds, they're going to have a piece of paper that says, no, I don't have overgrown weeds. It could have started in the house. It could have been electrical. It could have been any number of things.
Exactly.
But if the insurance company is going to say it's because of all the dead wood that was on your property, they'll be able to say, no, it really isn't.
I'm worried that they're not going to sue the city because you gave them the clearance and a brush fire comes and somehow their house goes
But you
on
didn't give
fire.
them a guarantee. I mean, you didn't give them, you didn't absolve them of fire ever happening
They
on the property.
relied on your expertise.
For the vegetation that is on site, as opposed to the roof shingles, as opposed to the electrical, as opposed to any number of other things. I can see by the setting sun in the sky, it's almost time for us to close out.
But I just have a quick question on that. Well, let's look at the positive side. Has this ever resulted in a lowering of homeowner premiums, having a certificate of brush clearance?
That I'm not exactly sure of.
Because that would be great for those 8,000
It helps you make that case, most certainly, and maybe controlling increases. Yeah.
So,
Anyway.
I have to go back to, so what you said, what is Pasadena Burbank do again?
Pasadena spends $155, and that gets you your first inspection and your reinspection.
So again, the inspection is mandatory for all those homes,
For all those,
properties
yes.
in the high
And
fire.
everybody in the high fire zone is getting inspected.
So they're charging a huge amount of money.
A huge
They're
amount of money.
charging the
yeah.
fully burdened rate.
Yeah.
And
fully
what does
burdened rate.
Burbank do?
Burbank does not charge anything. They don't charge a dime right now. Again, and I talked to Chief Lenahan over there. I know that this is something that they're looking at. But again, they don't have a software tracking system that we're recommending that we go to. And again, this is all about accountability and safety. That's all we're looking for. And we believe it brings a lot of value to our community.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
My last two slides are just a recap, and with apologies, I did make the mistake. I said that everything that was not covered in deletion and existing fees and increases was going to be adjusted by CPI, and Armin had corrected that. And as you see it here, this is the first slide we started with. It's the last slide, second to last slide we'll end with. There will be no change to 1484 of the fees, deletion of 48.
Except for the CPI, right?
737 will be CPI adjusted. So roughly 90% of the fees will either be no change or CPI only. And the other smattering would either be new items that you've heard from Chief Fish or those projects or those fees that the council has previously given us direction on to start marching towards cost recovery, but maybe not get there, and or the ones that you've told us this morning you want some additional information on.
So the ones, I'm sorry to interrupt, the ones that are no change, so basically CPI doesn't apply, are those the ones that the service is pegged against the fees pegged against the cost of service? How is it that CPI doesn't apply?
That the cost hasn't increased, our cost of service hasn't increased, the market hasn't necessarily changed, or whatever factor that we're using to set the fee hasn't measurably changed. So 2,100 and almost 2,200 of the 2,300 fees we wouldn't either change or only have CPI.
Okay.
That works for you, Armin?
Yes.
Okay, good. I don't want to upset Armin. And so Mr. Agajanian's question, the breakdown case, you're wondering how much money would come from these fees. From the new fees, as you heard from the chief, about 125,000 would come from that fire mitigation. The balance would come from the other fees that you saw. The general increases, again, a relatively small amount, almost $300,000. The CPI is perhaps the largest chunk on those 737 fees. For CPI increase would be almost $500,000 for a total of $1.41 million into the overall city coffers. That breaks out $650 in the general fund, $762 in the non-general fund departments. And with that, sir, that's all we have. And again, we will answer questions, do briefings with council members between now and June, and then come back with even information, depending on council calendars, for other public sessions if you so choose.
That's what I was going to go to for May 30th. I think that would be a good time because right now we're dark, and if we want to bring all these items that we requested today back on that date and discuss it, I think that's a
May 3rd. I thought we were dark May 30th.
Well, that's
right.
the point.
That's the point. I think we can bring that back and not go
Is that
dark.
after Labor Day or Memorial Day?
It's after Memorial Day. I mean,
Why don't we meet on the 23rd?
No quorum.
there's no quorum. I mean, that's where we're going to. I don't think we need to cancel too many meetings right after the 3-day holidays or 3-day weekends. So let's look into that and let the council know, according to. Right. Okay. So is there anything else? No, sir. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Because when I'm through with your cotton, you can't even buy gasoline. I'm going to take me a home. Gotta have a home.